All right, welcome back to Tuesday, March 31st. There are a few things you're going to need for today's lesson. One is that you're going to need the week 2 e-learning slides, so go ahead and open those up. And then you will also need under Tuesday the 8.2 notes. Just like last week, you can either print out your notes and fill them in by hand, or like most people did, you can just double click here and then just fill in the yellow blanks. This is probably the easiest way to do your notes and the quickest way because it's just right there on your screen. All right, let's go through our notes for the 31st. So one, we have some new targets. We're going to identify the impact of the Louisiana Purchase. So to do that, we're going to explain why the U.S. bought the Louisiana Territory. We're going to identify some explorers who mapped out all of this new land. And then we're just going to describe some of like the goals and experiences of those explorers. All right, what do you need to accomplish today? One, you need to fill out your 8.2 notes. And I just showed you where those were on Google Classroom. But then two, you also need to answer the Pear Deck questions. And like half of us did that last week and half of us didn't. It's really important to fill out the Pear Deck questions because that's part of the way that I know, like, did you understand this material? Or do we have more questions that we maybe need to go through next week too? So it's super important that you answer the Pear Deck questions. All right, so over here, there will be a nice video, this video of me talking in a little bit, but also there's like the link to get to Pear Deck, and then there is the code. This code is wrong. I'll fix the code, but you need to make sure that you are typing in the code, going to joinpd.com. You can click on the link, and then just like if we were in class, you would type in the code and get to these lines. Okay. So let's talk about the Louisiana Purchase just a little bit. So when we're talking about this land called Louisiana, it's important to know that in the beginning of the 1700s, this land, New Orleans and the rest of Louisiana, is actually owned by Spain, which is really convenient for them. They rule the entire Gulf of Mexico, Florida, and it goes all the way to the Rocky Mountains. So it's a very big space. But Spain gets really, really frustrated, especially after the American Revolution, because Americans keep trying to move into Spanish territory, and they don't necessarily always want to follow the rules, like speaking Spanish and like following all of the customs and traditions that people in this territory have. So eventually, it just becomes this huge headache for Spain trying to kick Americans out, saying you can't come here illegally, you need to like stay in America. So eventually, like, Spain just gives Louisiana to France. And another reason that they actually do this in this very secret territory is that they don't really want England to get this territory. And there's some sort of like mix up all around after the American Revolution to kind of keep this out of English hands. Okay. Whoops. This video is going to start playing. You should totally watch this Mr. Betts video because one, I think it's super funny, but two, it's going to bring up a lot of really, really good points about the Louisiana Purchase. So don't skip this. But I'm going to talk a little bit more about the Louisiana Purchase. France really loves having the Louisiana Territory because they want to build and expand their empire in North America, especially after they lost a ton of territory in the 7 Years' War. But in like the early 1800s, there's this thing called the Haitian Revolution. So the island of Haiti, all of the slaves rebel and basically just kick the French out and give freedom to everyone in the island of Haiti, which is super awesome. Not so great for France because it's super far away from the rest of France. They can't really control Louisiana, and they're afraid that there's going to be another revolution just like there was in Haiti. So France also has a whole bunch of money, war debts that they owe because they've been fighting with England from pretty much like 1780 to like 1820. They're broke. So France is going to offer to sell the US this whole territory for not very much, only a few $1,000,000, because they are desperate. They super need money and they need it quickly. Otherwise, like, they can't continue paying their military. They also had their own revolution, so things are very messy in France. They need a ton of money. Selling Louisiana to the US seems like it's going to be the easiest way to get all of this cash. Okay, so real quick, pause me, and then I want to know, why did France want to sell Louisiana? Is it A, they didn't, B, Louisiana was just too far away, or C, they really needed money to pay their debts? So answer this question and then come back to me. Boom! Okay, Thomas Jefferson is president when France, like, all this is going down with France, and he has a really, really, really hard choice to make. On the one hand, he realizes this is a huge bargain, that this land is very, very cheap, that it's a lot of land. On the other hand, he's a strict constructionist. The Constitution doesn't say that the president has the power to buy more land. So he's not sure that it's constitutional, and that really, really worries him. He doesn't want the president to have too much power. But also, $15 million, even though we're getting a lot of land, that's a lot of money, and it's going to increase the national debt a ton. Even though Thomas Jefferson and Alexander Hamilton didn't get along, Jefferson realizes that increasing the national debt is probably not a good idea. So he spends a lot of time thinking and thinking and thinking, trying to figure out what the heck he should do. And in the end, he decides he's going to throw his values, push them to the side, and he's going to buy Louisiana. It's just too good of a deal to pass up. Okay, so pause for a second. Why was Jefferson not sure he should buy Louisiana? And then just like literally pause this video and fill out this question. You can draw or you can write. Okay, we're going to move on to like a second paradox slide. You don't get a break. This is a map of the United States, the Louisiana Purchase, and where Spain is in like 1804 when we're kind of talking about this Louisiana Purchase. What I want to do is we're going to test some map skills. So using the drawing tool, you're going to draw a red circle around the area that is the Louisiana Purchase. Then you're going to draw a blue circle around where the United States is. And then the last thing that you need to do on this slide is you're going to insert like a comment box somewhere, some text. And I just want you to tell me, like, how do those two areas compare? Like, is one bigger or smaller? How is adding Louisiana going to maybe change the size of the US? Is it going to change it a whole bunch, or is it going to change it just a teeny tiny bit? Okay, so we bought this huge territory. It doubled the size of the United States. But Americans know pretty much nothing about all of that space. So Thomas Jefferson decides to send some explorers, Meriwether Lewis and William Clark, to go and explore all of this new territory. Lewis and Clark aren't going to go alone. They're going to create something called the Corps of Discovery, 50 explorers and soldiers who are going to go and help them. They leave from Virginia in 1804. It takes them 2 years to explore this territory and get back. They don't get back until 1806. That's 2 years that they couldn't really communicate with their families because, like, there's no phones, there's no internet, there's no postal service. They're exploring like this unknown territory. It's like going to Mars. So they're going to be cut off from everything going on in the United States for 2 whole years. This is a huge sacrifice, but hopefully they're going to learn some really cool things. And really, they had 4 goals, 4 things that they really, really wanted to do, or at least Thomas Jefferson wanted them to do. The first, and probably the most important for Americans, is that they wanted to find a waterway from the Missouri River to the Pacific Ocean. This is really important, trying to find like a river or a lake or something, maybe a combination of those things that would go from the Missouri River to the Pacific Ocean, because it means it would help with trade. That waterway doesn't exist, just like an FYI. They're going to search for it. They're never going to find it because it doesn't exist. But secondly, they want to create some accurate maps of the new territory. So they want to know where some big things are to help people who are going to later move west. They also want to make some peaceful introductions with Native American tribes. We'll talk more about that later, how successful or not successful that was. And then another really, really important one is that this is also a scientific expedition. They're trying to discover new plants and animals and minerals, trying to figure out what natural resources are in this Louisiana Purchase. And they're going to talk about some things like prairie dogs that people hadn't ever seen before and kind of share that with other scientists when they get back in 1806. So they're doing a lot. And now I want you to kind of summarize what are two goals that they have. You can write, you can draw them, pause me, push play when you're done. Okay, there's nothing that you need to do on this slide. This is just kind of a map of the pathway that Lewis and Clark took. They started here in Virginia. This is when it's just Lewis and Clark. And then as they're traveling, they're getting to Missouri. That's where they're recruiting those 50 members of the Corps of Discovery to go with them. And then they leave from St. Louis, Missouri in 1804, travel all the way here. This state might seem familiar. Travel all the way along this red path, go this way until they get to the Pacific Ocean, and then they have to try to find some ways to get back. This part gets a little confusing, but the pathway over here is pretty straightforward because they're just following the Missouri River. Okay, there is a super duper important member of the Corps of Discovery that we have not talked about yet. And that is Sacagawea. Sometimes you'll also hear her name pronounced Sacagawea, which is probably actually more accurate in Shoshone, but a lot of people will still just call her Sacagawea, including myself, just kind of out of habit. So Sacagawea or Sacagawea, they're both completely correct. Sacagawea, when she joined the Corps of Discovery, was actually just this 15-year-old Native American girl. She was originally part of the Shoshone tribe, which today we would find in modern day like Idaho and Montana. Even though she was only 15, Sacagawea was married. She married a Frenchman named Toussaint Charbonneau, and her husband, Charbonneau, was actually hired by Lewis and Clark to serve as an interpreter. The problem with that is that as they move along the expedition, they quickly realize that Charbonneau is not actually he's not very smart. He doesn't really know a lot of languages, but his wife, Sacagawea, does. She speaks French, she speaks multiple Native American languages, and when she can communicate with her husband, Charbonneau, he can translate all of that into English. Sacagawea is also a guide. She knows this territory because she traveled through it multiple times as a child. And super important for Lewis and Clark, she's a survival expert. She knows which plants are okay to eat and which ones are poisonous. She knows how to escape from black bears. She knows where the Missouri River is going to get really, really rough with these rapids and what they need to do to survive. In their journals, there are multiple journal entries from many members of the Corps of Discovery explaining that without Sacagawea, they probably would have died a lot. To make this expedition even more tough for her, Sacagawea had a baby, her son Jean-Baptiste, during the expedition. She only had a few days to rest before she had to strap her baby on her back and keep going. So Jean-Baptiste, the first 2 years of his life was pretty epic because he's with Lewis and Clark going on this amazing journey. But imagine just how tough that was for her, not only taking care of her baby, also taking care of the 50 members of the Corps of Discovery who, to be honest, were kind of clueless and didn't really know what to do. So without her, they totally would have gotten lost and failed, but she was there. She deserves a ton of credit for making sure that Lewis and Clark came back safely. Lewis and Clark, though, are not the only two people who are exploring this Louisiana territory. They're all the way up here following the Missouri River. There's this southern part of the Louisiana Purchase area too, and Jefferson sends a different explorer, Zebulon Pike, to explore this southern area. Pike spends most of his time in what is now Kansas and Colorado. Those are both parts of the Louisiana Purchase, but we're not sure. Historians kind of debate whether he got lost or he purposely went into Spanish territory, into what is now Mexico. Whether it was on purpose or an accident, he does get caught in Mexico, and the Mexican government is not very happy that he's there illegally. They think that he might be a spy, so he gets questioned and interrogated quite a bit, and then they just ship him straight back to Louisiana, and they say, just get out of here. Like, don't come into our territory. Make sure that Americans know they're not welcome here. Stay in your own space. But Pike does get a lot of like useful information about this southern area that's going to make Americans really want to move to this state, Texas, which is going to be kind of a big deal when you get to 8th grade history. Okay, the very last thing you have today is your exit ticket. And what I'm just going to ask you is to say, how well did you understand this? Could you explain this lesson to somebody in your household? Are you like kind of stuck and you maybe need to watch this video or go through the slides again? Or could you maybe explain most of it, but like there's one or two things that you're a little bit confused about still? Put your little circle where you want it, and then you are done with this Pear Deck today. Like your notes are 100% done. That's awesome because you'll need them for your quiz on Friday.